Hey, this is Sridhar from wpdevdesign.com. I just want to record my screen and walk you through how I have created a carousel slash slider custom block using ACF Pro. Um, and the way it works is that in the Gutenberg editor, the users can add um, or select or upload their images in a gallery block, in a gallery custom field, and those images will be automatically shown as a slider or a carousel with the settings that the users can select when they are editing the block. So this is how it appears on the front end, and in the back end this is how it looks. So here you can see that the images can be reordered. In here they can remove these images, add new images, and here they can set some options for the way that the Flickity works. So if you select left, for example, the first image is gonna start left. Otherwise, typically use this left align cell align mode when you have the slider. But if you want a carousel where the images are continuously looping, then you typically want to have a center cell align, and we can set the image width either in percentage, pixels, or any other valid unit, and it will update here live. So if you remove that, it's gonna take and use the default value that we have set, and similarly this gap is the space that is in between the images in the carousel. Okay, so let's just delete this, and so I think it's this one. Yeah, so when the first time you add this block, we can set some text. In this case I've set it to no images found, add select some, so the user can select some images and they will automatically appear as a slider. But let's select carousel mode, and yeah, all right, so let's update this and refresh. There we can of course add any number of such sliders or galleries. You can also click this pencil icon to get all those options right here without having to set them in here. Okay, just select some more. I think that's fine. Update. There. Of course, it doesn't look good because there is no space or margin between these two, but that can be easily added by CSS, or we can also provide a control or setting for that so users can set it up. Okay, so let me show you how this has been set up. This obviously needs ACF Pro to be installed. So in this case, I've created a field group called image carousel, and I've created two tabs. The first is the images, the second is options. That is what we see when we, here this is the first tab, this is the second tab. So inside the first tab, I've created this field of the type gallery, and that is what we see in here. Okay, and in the second tab called options, I've created a button group field type called cell align, and I've given some instructions and I've set the choices here. So if you see the description here, it will explain you that you need to have it like this where yeah, value and a label. So this is the value and this is the label. They should be like that, and we can specify the default value. And one thing you probably are not aware is that we can actually set some HTML tags here in the field labels and it'll work. Okay, so similarly I've set one more custom field called wraparound, which is again a button group with some instructions and the choices and default value. And I've set a custom field called image width, and I left it to be text because users would want to sometimes enter in percentage or pixels or viewport width or whatever. And I've set the default value and the placeholder text. And this is the last custom field that I've set while I'm just playing with this. This is for the space in between the slider images. And again, I just left it simple, kept it simple, and set this to text type. Okay, so the most important thing is that we set this field group to appear for block. Okay, so we need to select block here from the rules location meta box. And well, I should have told you that this entire thing is the second step. Okay, let me tell you the first step, because this option is not going to appear until we register a custom block using ACF's function. Okay, so this is my themes functions PHP. Of course, we can also do this in a custom functionality plugin, and I personally think that is the way to go and not put this code inside a theme, but I was just testing this. Anyway, so this line of code, what it does is we are registering a custom image size so that all the images inside the slider or carousel are gonna have the same width and height. If you want these images to have different widths but all have the same height, then you can simply set this to 0. So that means this image is going to be resized, keeping the height as 726 pixels, but the width is going to be proportional to whatever is the actual aspect ratio of the image. Okay, so yeah, so this is the handle for the custom image size. And then so there is this function. This can of course be called anything, but this function is hooked to this action ACF/init. And I read in the documentation that this runs very early in the WordPress the cycle. Anyway, so we attach this function to this hook, and inside this function we are going to call this particular function called ACF register block type. And to this we basically pass the parameters that this is like the metadata for the block itself. So yeah, so here you can see that this is the title, Flickity Carousel, and that is well, you can just ignore this. This was not something that was working. I was testing something else. So yeah, here, this is the title, which is what appears here, and this description is what appears here, is coming from here. And this Flickity Carousel is like the identifier or the name for this block, and it has to be unique. And this render template in here, we are basically setting the path or the location of the PHP file which is going to be shown or rendered here, and of course also in the front end. And render template allows you to specify either the path to this PHP file, or if the code of your block is a simple one, you can also just specify a function, and inside that function right here in this location you can start defining how the template should be rendered, or what should be shown in the block. Okay, so this category is formatting. I'm not exactly sure what are the other possible values for this category, but it is what is going to be, I guess if you press this, I think this is the category, say text, media, design. I'm guessing these are the categories for the blocks, and that is where it should appear. So formatting probably refers to this. Okay, and the icon, so this icon that you see right now, which looks like a file with code. So this is the basically the dash icon name for that. So if you go to dash icons and then you look up or locate an icon that you want to use, you can get this from there. One thing I would like to mention is so if you pick your icon and you see this thing, the entire thing, you should not include this first dash icons dash part. Just get the rest of it, and this is what should go here. Okay, so the keywords are the ones, I think the maximum is 2. Yeah, so or 3 perhaps. So you can search, the users can search for this, and that is what is going to appear. So those are the keywords. This edit mode, there are a few modes like edit, preview, and whatnot. You can read that about in the documentation, but I just noticed that the default one is fine. We can see the preview here. We can click this and make changes to the settings, and when you are looking at the preview, you can also get these things here for the block. So this is just perfect, the default. Okay, and this is important. So I'm using this NQ assets key for this array. So the way you read this is, basically that ACF register block type is the function to which we are passing an array as the input or the parameter. So this array, it contains multiple key value pairs. So this is the key and this is the value on the right side. So one such key is this NQ assets, and that is basically taking a anonymous function, and in that here I'm basically specifying that this flickity.min.css be loaded. Okay, so if you take a look at Flickity, yeah, so here you can see that this is that file flickity.min.css. You can just download this, and you need to place that inside this path, template parts, blocks, Flickity carousel. So this is the name that we have given to this block. So I've just placed or uploaded that CSS file into this location, and I've given the handle or the name for this particular CSS file as Flickity. Okay, and in the next line, I have we are defining this as the handle for this second CSS file, and the name of the file that we have set to be loading is this Flickity Carousel CSS. So in this, I have just placed some styles that should apply to the carousels or the sliders. And in this line, we are basically loading Flickity's JavaScript file, which can be downloaded from this URL. So I just downloaded that. I've uploaded that to this location, template parts, blocks, Flickity, Carousel. Okay. One thing that I am not certain as to why it is like that is, typically when we use this WPNQ style and yeah, like this, it loads in the head. So this file, if you normally search in the source code, okay, so here you can see this file right now is basically in the before the closing body. That means it is loading in the footer. But normally CSS files, they get loaded in the head. And I'm not sure why this is not working. So I need to contact ACF about this. Okay, so let's move on. So we have loaded Flickity CSS. We have loaded our own custom CSS. That should apply to these slides. And we have loaded the Flickity's JavaScript file. And finally, we are loading a init file by the name flickity-init.js, and I've set this to be dependent on Flickity, which is defined here on this line. Okay, so true basically tells that the script should tells WordPress to load the script in the footer. Alright, so once we have registered the custom block, then we need to actually go ahead and set up the field group. So I've explained these things before, and now the custom blocks that we have registered are going to appear here, and from here you select your block and update or publish your field group. Okay, so let's take a look. Let's take a look at the PHP file. So let's concentrate on this one. Okay, so render template, that means what should appear in the preview as well as on the front end. That is what is defined in this block template. So this is basically, I copied from the ACF Pro documentation and made a few changes, but so this line is basically gonna set the ID for the parent element. So if I inspect this, so this particular div right now, okay, the parent one, it has this ID called Flickity-Carousel, okay, dash. So that is the part that we have that's coming from here. Okay, and then whatever is the ID of this block, which is unique. So every block will have a unique ID, and that is what we see here. And the next is this one called Flickity Carousel class name. So this is the base class, and that we can see here. Class is equal to Flickity Carousel. Okay, and this line of code will ensure that if a custom class name has been specified for the block, then that gets added onto it. So you can target a particular block and give it some class like let's say carousel 1, and come here, reload, and that is going to add on to the existing classes list. Well, in this case, the Flickity Carousel. Okay, and finally this line of code will add the align class to the existing classes. So yeah, if based on whatever the user has selected here, that class is automatically gonna get added there, and based on that we can make some CSS changes if necessary. Okay, so here I am basically getting the values of the custom fields. So carousel images is the gallery type of field. We are getting the entire gallery object and we are storing that in this variable called images. And similarly, cell align, wrap around, and this one, it basically says that if well, this is basically like setting the default value. Okay, so the first time this gets run, since image width is not set by the user, it is going to take this value that we specify here. So it's like specifying the default value, and similarly for the gap, here we are specifying the default value. Okay, so finally we are specifying the handle for the custom size for the images in the slider, and if you remember, that has been defined earlier over here. Okay, and so this div is what we see here, the main parent div for each block. So here we are specifying the div. If you want, you can make it section, that's up to you. And here we are setting the ID, we are setting the class, which have been defined above. And here we just write the actual PHP code that should output what you want to see in the block. So if images, that means if there is at least one image that has been uploaded to this gallery, then here it's basically printing out this div, and that you can see inside. Okay, so this is this div which has this class called gallery carousel, and I'm using the print formatted function, printf function, and here we are setting a couple of data attributes. So data cell align is %s. That means the first instance of this %s placeholder is going to come from here, and the second instance of this %s or placeholder is going to be taken from this one. And so this is basically a way for us to pass the values of these custom fields from this PHP into this JavaScript file. Okay, we are going to use them like this later on. So it basically depends on how many custom options or settings you want to add to your block, and based on what you have here, that is what you need to be setting up here. So if your script or if your PHP code has a new setting, additional setting or control that you want to add here using ACF custom field, then you need to add that in here as well. Okay, right. So we are just opening the div tag here, and inside that we are looping through the images of the gallery for each image. Initially I just had it like this, where it would just output the image HTML for each image, but I wanted to add I wanted to basically add the width and the style tags or attributes. So that's why I had to comment it out and replace this with this formatted string, which will basically output the image with its alt text and the width. Okay, so if you see, take a look at this one, the third one, %s is basically this one, right? Yeah, so this image width is the custom field. That means whatever is set here, that value, that is this one. Right, so height, it comes from the image itself. and here I'm adding the inline style attribute with the margin right set to %s. So that's basically this gap between each slide. So that is coming, that gets replaced by this value. Okay, and we finally close the div that was open here. And this is where we text in the else part. This is where we set the text or content that should appear when the block has been added the very first time and no images have been set. If you remember, so now that that is done, let's move on to this one, Flickity init. So Flickity init is set here. Again, I've just copied the code from ACF Pro and I've made a few changes, but the way that this basically works is that we define this function. Okay, the function has a name. We're setting that name called initialize block, and this this code is what is going to be run for each block, and we need to basically tell ACF Pro to run this particular code, okay, whatever is there inside this function for each block. And the way you do it is using this one on the front end. Okay, so on the front end, okay, on the front end, when the document is ready for each of Flickity Carousel, so that one, yeah, so that's this main opening or the main parent div element for each block. So for each block, I'm saying run that initialization code which we define inside this function. And the something similar that we do here, but for the backend, that means in the editor, is via this code. So this render block preview slash type is equal to whatever is the name of the block is a JavaScript action to which we are hooking this particular function initialize block, and that is defined here. So what I've done here is we are basically, fetching the gallery carousel, which is the inner one. Okay, so this inner one, and I'm storing that in a variable, and I'm initializing Flickity on that, and I'm passing in some values which should be like default, which are not something the users can change. But for these other values which should be changed by the user, we are basically using this data function and pulling the value of the data attribute that has been set here before. So let's see. So data cell align, yeah. So since gallery carousel is the element in question that we are dealing with right now, and we have set the cell align data attribute to whatever the user sets in the custom field, the value of the custom field that is set here. Similarly for the other one, and that is pretty much it. So yeah, so probably this is just some long-winded talking to myself kind of thing, but I hope it helps somebody. Bye for now.